Hello, my name is Holger Seim. I'm the Director of Drama Studies at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. I'm here with Marcel Stewart, Director of The Birds by Yvette Nolan, which is the third show in our main stage season and opens February 6th and runs through February 15th. Hello, Marcel.
How you doing, Holger?
I'm all right. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
So The Birds is a first for us. It's our first play, the first play we've ever done by an indigenous author. We've also done, if I'm remembering correctly, virtually no, in the 25 years or so, virtually no plays that have anything to do with ancient Greek comedy. We've done a bunch of tragedies. Now, Yvette Nolan's play is an adaptation isn't, I don't think, quite right, but she starts sort of from Aristophanes' play The Birds and takes it and turns it into a play that is full of, well, it draws on indigenous mythology, it draws on sort of origin stories from other mythologies, Ovid and so on, it draws on contemporary culture, so it's a fascinating amalgamation of influences. How does one, as a director, approach a play like this?
Well, I'll tell you how I approached it as a director, with a lot of anxiety and insecurity and questions of like, is this my story to tell? And how do I authentically lead a group of students through this story that is not necessarily directly connected to me. So there's a level of research and understanding that I need to do. But then how do I bring that into the rehearsal process so that it is part learning, but also part training and part healing, I think, because I think a lot of this, from what I'm gaining from this play, healing is very much at the root of it, communal healing, transformation, and we can get to that later on. But, I think recognizing what the insecurities are, what those anxieties are, saying hi to them, letting them know they can hang out in the back seat, and being like, okay, if I'm really scared about it, there's something I should be doing then. So let's go forward. And so what I did is I contacted a few friends of mine, a few mentors who are indigenous, to kind of just have a conversation about what is my access into this? Because the play, upon reading it the first few times, it was so weird in like really great ways. It was funny, and I was like, this is so funny. This is so odd. Is that it? Like, there's got to be more to it than that. And so I spoke to a good friend of mine, Keith Barker. Keith, what's up? And Keith was like, I hear you. I hear where your anxieties or your hangups are coming from. But, Yvette wrote the play from her perspective as an indigenous woman. That doesn't mean you need to come in there and pretend to be indigenous. Like, not at all. The transindigeneity, I think, is at the center of the story also. And so what does first contact mean to you? Keith was saying, like, what's your interaction or relationship with that? My parents are from the Caribbean. I've done a whole journey into understanding why and how our last name is Stewart, when we know, like, there were no, Jamaican Stewarts down the line. Like, something had happened along there. So once I started to reclaim what this story was for me, then I started running. And I got really excited about the perspective of trying to build a world on top of what's already there from Yvette. But if I'm gonna bring my culture in, let's invite the cast to also do the same thing and see what we can build together from there.
And the cast is very diverse, with lots of different biographies and sort of family origin stories as well.
Yeah.
And so you drew on those in the process.
Yeah. Like I emailed folks before we even started rehearsal and just asked, like, so can you all let me know what is your cultural heritage and what are some symbols or colors or parts of that heritage that, stick out to you or are important to you? And so I got lengthy emails of eager excitement to share parts of who they are. There was also uncertainty and some confusion at a fractured relationship with that part of their ancestry or lineage, which I thought was great. I'm like, excellent. Like, how do we, in a safe way, bring that into the space? Those questions that you have, maybe there's a way that we can interrogate that in our process. And so, yeah, it showed up, once they shared everything with me, made a little Google Excel spreadsheet, and then shared that with the design team. And so some of their responses have shown up in costume choices, colors, beads and accessories that they're wearing, dialect work also.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's really beautiful in that way, that they've, without having to share that necessarily with the audience, but the audience hopefully will get this smorgasbord of cultural spices at them, and hopefully we'll pick up on it. And if not, that's okay. But they might just, there's a character who has a Scottish accent, and in talking to that actor over time, figuring out, like, getting really specific about the region of Scotland that they wanted that accent to be, and so who knows who picks up on that. But I think there's such truth and authenticity for that actor to know who they're bringing into the room, onto the stage, into the performance. And so, yeah, that was part of the idea and the goal of wanting to incorporate some of the cultures there.
Yeah, interesting. Because the play, well, I should say a bit more about the play, because people have the play is about a bunch of humans entering the realm of the birds, right? Where they meet a human who is sort of transitioned maybe to being a bird, maybe not. Right. That's one version. But then he's also married to the nightingale, who has an origin story where she used to be a human, which comes from Ovid. She's Procne, right? It becomes a nightingale, or maybe a swallow. Sort of like But sort of the division. Like, at first, you might think that, like, the humans and the birds are just completely separate, and first contact means that, well, these two separate things encounter each other for the first time. But then it turns out that some of the birds actually were human once and others weren't. And there's the question of how can a human become a bird? Which I think the play kind of leaves open at the end.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so how do you read that? Like, what do you think that is actually about? Like, that question of, because it's partly about identity, right? And like becoming something that you weren't.
Yeah, I mean, identity certainly. Community was a theme that we talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And I guess identity is connected to community in many ways, and culture also. But if you find yourself, speaking about me, growing up all over the place, but specifically in Bristol, England, where I was raised for 4 years or so. And everyone around me was Black and Jamaican Black. And so coming to Canada, I thought Bristol was like the blackest place. Imagine, you're laughing. Yeah, I thought it was like the blackest. I really did. And then,
amazing.
And then coming back to Bristol after graduating university and being an adult and having a sense a bit of politically what's going on in the world and racial dynamics, and being like, oh, it's not the blackest place. Far from that, actually. But it was interesting that the community of Caribbean immigrants, specifically the Windrush generation, made a home, made it seem this ecosystem for survival, for preservation, for healing. In spite of everything that was going on. And so I think about that in relation to the birds, in that they talk about escaping society, escaping humanity, escaping the laws and the institutions and man, to come to this place that is harmonious and that has balance,
right,
and that urges a connection and communication with that land. And the birds know that already. They're very clear about what this land can do, what this land needs, and how they can service it.
Yeah.
And And so when a couple of the characters, Sandpiper, Hoopo's another, Nightingale even, there's a thing at play where in order to begin the transformation, the community you need to give yourself to the community.
Right. Yeah.
In whatever aspect that might be. And the thing with Hoopo, which I hope is not a spoiler, but there is something about someone who pretends to give themselves to the community.
Right.
Dr. Bettina Love calls it the allyship versus co-conspiratorship, right? The idea of someone who can put a black square up on Instagram in solidarity for all the causes, and then claim at the end of their Instagram post, I'm doing a good thing, right? I'm an ally, versus a co-conspirator who can put something on the line for someone else.
Right.
So like, what is the need, and can you fill that need? What is the thing that you can offer to this community, so that you're not just taking from it, but you're actually, there's a transaction, there is a give and there's a take. And the humans that have transformed into birds, I think have discovered what that give and take is.
Right.
Whereas those that haven't are just still taking.
Yeah. That's interesting. See, it's funny that you used the word transaction there, because one of the things, as I was rereading the play, I was thinking like, man, some of these people, I don't think this is a spoiler, but I feel like Jack, for instance, Jack is super transactional, right? Which is different from the transaction you're describing.
Yeah.
Because I think that transactionality is all about like mutual benefit, like I'll make a buck and you'll make a buck sort of thing, right? Rather than I'm going to give something of myself and I'm not getting anything back in direct exchange for it.
Exactly.
Although I might get something back more indirectly or something.
Yeah. You might get something, and who knows what you'll get back. But you got to be open to that, I think. Or, my sense is there's an openness that what comes your way might not be the thing that you want to come your way.
Right. Yeah.
But it's the thing you need, you know?
Yeah, because otherwise it's just a business exchange.
Or
a commercial exchange.
Exactly.
Like that.
At that point, why be here? Let's just go back down.
Right.
Right.
Yes. So to go back, so that's sort of the dramaturgical logic of the play, I guess, and the sort of plot. The cultural exchange, or the sort of cultural mixing that we talked about earlier, that also happens like in the play on a sort of intense level, right? Like the all sorts of references to Shakespeare that she identifies in footnotes, and then references to she says something at one point, I think, where like this is the beginning of a sequence of references to Nirvana lyrics.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait. So and I was wondering, like, these sort of hints that she drops throughout the play that basically, it seemed to me, reading it, that it's like, yes, I'm an indigenous author, and there's a lot of indigenous thought and story in this play, but I'm also engaging with all these other things. Yeah. And here I've given you some breadcrumbs. Go ahead and follow them, or not. But like, how important, so as a gesture, right, this sort of bringing together of all these sort of elements seems important. But was it important to you, like as you were sort of preparing it in the process, to actually follow all the breadcrumbs? Or
yeah, what it did for me was it made the relationship to space and time just vast. And it really concretized, I guess, or crystallized that it's an adaptation of a play that was written thousands of years ago about a creation story that happened tens of thousands of years ago that is populated with references as far as recently as 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So Yvette has captured a whole breadth of time in this story. And instead of doing the kind of director thing of like, let's make a chronological order of all the things, what we did do is just talk about the references and just mark where the references happened in time. There's some Stephen King references
yes,
as well.
yeah.
Just to remind us that this story is a cyclical story because all of the cultures that are present have a similar kind of start story or have an idea of like a creation story.
Yeah.
And so just charting the different dates was useful for us to kind of free us up from sticking to like any idea of who Jack and Gulliver might be today.
Right.
Are they modern? Are they this? And I'm like, well, let's try and stay away from that and just think of them as they are modern and they are classical and they are this and they're like they can be from any time. And see what that does. And yeah.
But that's why with Gulliver, we're quite literally, right? So you have Jack, who's contemporary. I'm not gonna say who is a reference to, because it puzzles me slightly, but it doesn't matter. So Jack is very much contemporary.
Yep.
I mean, Gulliver is a reference to Swift's Gulliver, but also has lived in Toronto, right? So these characters, these human characters, are kind of. I mean, if the birds are, well, it's not actually true that the birds are all like from the bird realm or whatever, as we discussed. So the birds are themselves sort of heterogeneous in a way in this. But the humans are not like all like contemporary either. They have sort of histories and biographies packed into them as well that are kind of not of human time, but of sort of cultural time or something like that.
And you know, we talked a bit about that as well, trying to understand or make sense of our relationship with our cultures. And I think for this group of students who are, are in their fourth year, about to graduate and go into the world and have taken all these classes and might not have accessed their cultural ancestry, lineage, backpack, so to speak, in any number of their classes, now have an opportunity to do that. I'm asking them to do that and being met with uncertainties about what's too much, or I've never been asked to do this before, so like, can I? Or, when I have, I've been told it's too, I'm too selfish, or it's too loud. And I'm like, I want that. Like, give me that. Give me the loudness. Like, so that's been a real reminder about like some of my questions too, about like the institution and the sort of structures that are in place within that institution, and how does a student from the global majority tap into that global majorityness of them within the institution without feeling like they're being too much of anything. Because I just wanted them to like to go, to soar. Still an ongoing discovery and question to be answered, I think.
So, okay, let me ask to put a slightly different twist on that, because I actually think there's a bigger question about acting in there as well, right? Like, or maybe a smaller question actually, but acting in there, where it seems to me that there's a sort of a tension between, on the one hand, the call for the desire for actors to be artists and to give of themselves in process and to draw on their own experiences and bring something to the table. And then on the other hand, the sort of sense that, well, there's a right way of doing this, right? And there are methods that you should use or whatever. And those two things, I think the latter can often really limit the sort of free expression that the first part requires.
Yeah, acting's hard, right? It's because I think, and as I said, day one, and I continue to say throughout the process, what I'm asking of you is not the only way to go about doing this when you go out into the industry, nor is my way the law.
Right.
I'm just offering up the option that it is possible to go against this idea of rightness and structure and work from impulse and work from a desire, an idea that you have, not to judge it, not to already police that thought, but to just play and see what comes from that. And then we can kind of adjust and edit and do whatever from there. But I understand and recognize the anxiety around that. Around that. So I tried to set up a space that was generous and kind and warm and also like as judgment free as we could be. We had a room agreement, and every day, no judgment was something that we would say every day. Cool. And yet there's so much judgment, right? Like, of course. It's so telling how hard the internal work is. I feel like, was it Dave Chappelle, or maybe it was someone who said that like you spend so much of your career, the early part, working to be your influencers, and then you spend the rest of your career pushing your influence away and like standing into your own.
Right.
And so, I just, what a gift to be able to work with these students on their journey right now.
Yeah.
And hopefully I've dropped some breadcrumbs for them as they go forward.
Sounds great. Okay, but last, we only have a few minutes left.
Yes.
So I want to pick up on that. So the sort of question of collaboration and the students bringing their creative ideas and you playing off of them and so on, and talk and hear from you about design. Because we're sitting on this set and it's filled with little details and it's kind of awesome. And behind us there's this,
wild, right?
I don't know how visible this is. There's something that looks like a sort of sunken concrete tower or something, which fascinates me because it's from the play I would have expected a pristine natural place, and then there's this, and suddenly we immediately see this is not actually as pristine as we might have imagined, which is also what the play in a way teaches us about the birds. So. How did this, and I haven't seen the costumes, but what I've heard is they sound detailed and fascinating. Like, was the design process sort of similarly back and forth? And
yeah, very much so. Sarah, Michelle, geniuses at what they do, magicians at what they can create. Because in our initial meetings, I would just like say random thoughts and with no expectation that they take those thoughts and do this with it, like none at all. But having watched things like, The Last of Us, and there's a documentary actually that really was the kind of genesis for this idea. It's called Concrete Empire. And it's all about, I think it's Japan, where they built all these sky rises and stadiums and communities with the prospect of Americans coming and basically buying them.
Okay.
And that never happened. So they invested all of these resources into building worlds, like cities that have gone abandoned and aren't used anymore. And in the documentary, they do like this fast forward, or they come back years later, and like Earth has reclaimed the space.
Rewilding.
Yeah. They've like, the trees have grown and animals are now habitat, like taking over the spaces. And there was something about like how did the humans get here? What is the relationship between the human world and this world? And the idea of reclaiming something that the humans still might claim to be theirs.
Right.
Yeah. It was an interesting tension that I offered to Sarah, and Sarah was like, "Great, here you go."
And she built
a
3D form of
totally.
That is so cool, right? Because that gets at the sort of the layers of history, right? As the layers of sort of contact and return to nature and contact again. That the play is kind of about, I think, on a sort of subterranean level.
Totally. I just heard old Orange Face yesterday say that he wants the U.S. to take over Gaza.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
The Riviera of the Middle East.
Finally.
You know what I'm saying?
Finally.
You know what I'm saying? It's like the play it's still going. It's still very much going.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I hope people come and see it.
Yes, well, this feels like a very timely note to end on. Thank you, Marcel.
Thanks, Holger.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I hope we'll see you at the Birds sometime between tomorrow and February 15th.